Okay, I'm Chana Weisberg. This is In Conversations with Chana, and our conversations are always with incredibly inspiring and interesting people who are on wonderful journeys of life. So today we have a wonderful guest with us. Her name is Lana Tiersky, Dr. Lana Tiersky, and she's going to share with us a little about her journey. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Lana.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hannah.
So it was very interesting. I was listening to you tell about your story, and I asked you to join us on here because I found your journey and your story so fascinating, at the same time so relatable. So much of what so many people are going through. So can you share with us a little about your story, a little about yourself, and then we'll get into this.
Sure. Well, I'll start out by saying, the journey is a journey, right? And as the journey of life is a journey, the journey towards, learning more observance or learning more Torah or even just learning about your observance or even understanding what God or the Torah is a journey,
It's a
right?
journey,
it,
absolutely.
it is a journey. I learned everything I learned in Hebrew school was wrong, So,
It's like the book, everything I needed to learn in life, I learned in kindergarten, but no, it wasn't, I guess.
it's all wrong. So that was a bit eye opening. But in terms of my background, I grew up in Chicago, in the suburbs of Chicago, about a
It
mile.
was freezing cold. I just got back from there.
Yes, much colder. It was funny this past weekend. I said to my kids when it was very cold here in New York, I said, it's like, 5 degrees. I said, this is how I grew up, guys.
Right. Except
Right?
when it was 5 degrees here, it was like minus 20 there. We were
It
just
was
there.
even with snow, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I grew up about an hour out of the city, and I grew up in a home you would consider like very Jewishly identified. My mother was very proud of being Jewish, my father as well. We went to synagogue on the holidays, but it was not an observant home in the sense we didn't keep kosher, we didn't keep Shabbat. We didn't keep most of the laws other than going to synagogue, on the high holidays.
I guess
And
typical Jewish, proud, Jewishly proud, American Jew nowadays.
yeah. And when my mother had moved into that area, she had moved out of, living in Chicago and sort of like a Jewish little enclave in the 60s. And then she moved out to these suburbs. And she particularly chose that suburb. One is financial reasons, and the other was there was a Reformed synagogue on the corner, right? So she figured, well, this is going to be okay.
Right.
And then when it came time for my siblings to go to high school, and my sibling closest in age is 7 years older, so they're all quite a bit older, she decided to send them to religious high school. And the reason why she decided to send them is a bit of an interesting history. My sisters relate it's because she felt it was really time that they have a solid Jewish education, which was important to her because, she identified strongly, as being Jewish and didn't feel they were learning as much as she'd like. But the other story is that my brother was a handsome man, blonde, blue-eyed, tall, was starting dating age.
Yeah.
And she wanted to, him to meet other Jewish girls, which was very difficult where we lived.
Interesting. So I
But
meeting someone Jewish and marrying someone Jewish, and you do speak about that in your story as well, how that was so important to her.
yeah, so important to her, which is funny because I used to joke with my friends, and I don't know if this is the best thing to say to a public audience, but at my house, it was like you could do whatever you wanted to do. Like you can say, "Oh, hi, mom, I'm taking a trip to Florida tomorrow with my friends, driving up," and she'd be like, "All right, is that what you want to do? Go ahead, be safe." But if you told her you were dating someone non-Jewish, that was it.
Wow.
So it was extremely important to her. And anyway, so my sisters went to religious high school I'm sorry, religious high school, and from that standpoint, became religious and stayed religious. And recently we were talking about why, and both of them felt that being religious added to their lives in a
Mm.
significant way, and that it added meaning and a sense of focus that they felt otherwise wasn't there.
Interesting.
And
And we'll
then
get, we'll get a little bit more into that about you, but you didn't feel that way at that point in time.
no, no, not at all.
You probably you expressed how you felt that it was just the opposite of leading a meaningful life. That was very shackling, and how did you feel about it as a Jewish woman as well? Like you had a certain preconceived notion, I guess, that it was just very unliberating.
Oh, well, in my teenage years, I thought that, becoming a more observant Jew meant living this authoritative, male dominated, rule bound hierarchy. And, my brain couldn't wrap around that, because why on earth would anyone want to go from the freedom of living life to all of a sudden having to be following a bunch of rules set by old men?
Of course. So what changed?
Well, what changed, it took a lifetime to change, right? It certainly did not change overnight. There were no cherubs that flew down and said, please, please join us, or anything of that nature. But I think the real change started when my husband and I had our own children. And, I'm a psychologist, so I have a higher degree. My husband has a higher degree. So, first thing, we approach everything very academically. And we're like, okay, we're very proud of being Jewish, and we're going to have these children who we want to teach to be proud of Jewish. But if we're going to give them a choice about, being more Jewish, more observant, or what their level of choice of Judaism is going to be, we can't teach that, right? We can't do that. We don't know enough. So we sent them to day school, and we also became much more involved in our Chabad, and we were very involved in our Chabad. And, that's pretty much where we remained until more recently. And then more recently, it evolved to where we are now. But I just want to digress and tell you like one story that's relevant.
Absolutely.
When my son, who's now 18 and will be going to yeshiva next year, hopefully, he just finished his application, so fingers crossed, in Israel. So 10 years ago, when he, was about 8, he and his 2 older sisters were going to a day school near our house in Mahwah, New Jersey. And for various reasons, he couldn't continue there. And neither, it was just time for him to leave. And that was a big upheaval, but it was something, that we had to do. So we went to one of the local schools, which wasn't so local. It was about 30 miles away. I'm sorry, 30 minutes away, but it was a very observant school. So it wasn't like the school they were in, which was more sort of pluralistic and not as observant. The only other schools really in the area to even consider, even though this was still a half hour away, was more observant. And when I brought him in, and was also the prospect of bringing in 3 children, because I would have moved everyone over, I asked the admissions counselor sort of point blank, I said, well, do you think my children will fit in here? I said, I understand that most of the children here are more observant. My children are not. Do you think that will be a problem for them socially? And she said to me, she goes, well, it's not a problem at all, Dr. Tiersky. We're very open to people who are in transition.
Hmm.
And I remember at the time being so angry because I was not in my mind, I was not in transition. I was perfectly happy with the Jew that I was.
Right. Of
I went
course.
to Chabad regularly. My kids went, to day school and even Hebrew school. We celebrated the holidays. What was there to transition, right? So needless to say, they did not continue there. And the irony, if you want to call it an irony, is I was back at that same school in 2021 with my two youngest in transition.
In transition. Interesting. Is that where your children go now?
No, it's not that school. It was a different school, but I was back at that same school, and this time, it was quite different. But I think there was an event that I like to think about. As I said, it's a journey, so there were many small things along the way that led to the transition. Like one small thing, which was actually a huge thing, was a few years ago. I don't even remember how long. I said to my rabbi, who's really wonderful. I said to him, Rabbi, when we learn about things in the Torah and we learn about, the Bible and, even the laws and the rules, I said, I agree with them. As a psychologist, it makes total sense. Shabbat, as a psychologist, makes total sense. Time to be with your family, time to unplug, time to have unity with other people, time to find meaning in the world, time to have gratitude and appreciation. There's no one that can deny the logic of that and the sense of that. So I said, so there are, most of the Torah that I know, I agree with. But what sort of holds me back is I'm not sure I believe in God, right?
Interesting. Wow. Mm-hmm.
And he says to me, just like I would have revealed to him that I had a turkey sandwich for lunch, he's
Right.
walking while he's telling me this is not an issue for him. He goes, okay, good. We're not a religion of faith, so don't worry about it. We're a religion of action. Do, more mitzvot or good deed. And, your mind will learn these things and follow accordingly.
Hmm.
And,
So he said the main thing is just do things. And he knew that would change you.
yeah.
Do you believe in God now?
Yeah. I mean,
What changed?
what?
What changed?
Well, like I said before, I didn't know what God was. Right. I didn't believe in God because I thought God was a man with a long white beard sitting in
up
the
there.
clouds
Right.
on a throne,
Right.
wagging his finger.
And you didn't want that God, because who would want that God? Right.
Yeah, I don't want that God,
Sure.
right? And then when you pray and you don't know otherwise, and you don't know what the prayers are and who and what you're praying to something that sounds like, my God, my King, ruler of all. You think you're talking to a guy sitting in the throne.
Sure. And what does God mean to you now?
What does God mean to me now? I mean, one thing I love is that Judaism allows for the fact that we can accept that we might not fully understand what God is.
Mm.
So that to me is a relief.
That's beautiful.
Because it takes the pressure off me from knowing exactly.
Absolutely. And we're talking about something so unknowable, it's so confined to, you can't confine him to human intellect. So that makes a lot of sense what you're saying.
Yeah, so like that's a relief. But to me, you know,
It's interesting though, because we titled this, how a hot pink washing cup transformed my life. So, how did this hot pink washing cup transform your life?
well,
Tell us a little about that.
you know, my rabbi also every day in his Saturday sermons.
Who is your rabbi? Just to give him
Oh,
some credit for being so amazing.
and it's not just my rabbi, it's my rebbitzin as well,
Always the
who,
Rebbitzin, right?
yes, who is incredible as well. So it is the Chabad of Northwest Bergen County, and it's Rabbi Hanoch Kaplan and Mimi Kaplan.
Wonderful, wonderful people.
Yeah. And anyway, so I picked my daughter up from camp, which is also a wonderful camp, which is a Chabad camp. And it's Camp Gan Israel in the Poconos. That is also served by an incredible director and his wife, who are also, I feel, gifts to have come into my life because I learned a lot for them. But anyway, one summer I was picking up my daughter from camp, and um, she is every bit a typical sixth grader at that point, you know. And when my daughter went to camp, like all of her two older siblings had went, so she had felt very comfortable there. And so when it came to the packing list, she didn't ascribe to the packing list. She even had like a rollaway cart with shelves and all these things. So I go to pick her up, and strewn about her is hoodies and stuffed animals and all of her suitcases and the rolling cart. But in her hands, she has grasped onto this hot pink wash cup with her name in Hebrew in rainbow letters. And, you know,
For our listeners that might not know what a washing cup is, do you want to explain what we do with a washing cup?
Sure. We, in the morning, we wash our hands right as we awaken to sort of symbolize that we're readying ourselves for the day, for our connection to God, and to have a meaningful experience. And then we say the morning prayers.
Right. So she was holding this hot pink washing cup that had
Right.
her name on it. Yeah.
Right. And it is among observant households a very typical, um, you know, uh, routine part of life. But if you're not coming from an observant household, it may not be the first, part of your routine that comes to mind.
Of course.
Right. So I see her standing and like grasping this hot pink wash cup, and in that moment, I was just like, had so much awe for the fact that here is my daughter, my everyday, child, having just spent a month immersed in a world of observance, because that's what they do at camp. And from that experience, after being immersed in that world for a month, she comes home with and holds on to, the meaning and the significance and the purpose, of observance. And it's fun and joyous,
Mhm.
right? Because it's like a hot pink wash cup with her name. It's not like a blank, stainless steel basin.
Right.
It is like, joyful and fun. And I asked her if she knew what it was, because I thought, okay, well, maybe this was just like a souvenir she took home, and wasn't even quite sure what it was for. And she looks at me, with that 12-year-old look of, oh God, you don't know anything. And she says to me, she goes, God. Well, she didn't say that. She implied that. She's like, it's a Negelwasser, which is the Hebrew word for wash cup. And I just took away from that my children are learning that even routine, daily, deeds that might seem mundane are actually something fun and joyous and meaningful and can be taught that way. And for me, that was a profound shift,
Hmm.
because that was not the Judaism I grew up with,
Hmm.
right? I, like I said, I'm learning what God is now. I'm learning what the Torah is now. Like, I didn't know what the Torah was. I didn't know the Torah was a book that gave us guidelines to have a connection to God and to live a life of connection, meaning, and unity. I thought it was a book of rules that kept a group of people cohesive.
Right. Interesting.
History, with history thrown in, right? So, I mean, I didn't even know what the Torah was, which is kind of, which is sort of mind boggling, if you will. But for my daughter, what I was going to say is Rabbi is always saying, and Mimi, that the miracles of God are all around us if we just look, right?
Hmm.
And we can just see. And I think we're always looking for like these big, um, like I said, we're waiting for the cherubs to come down and anoint us and take away the pain or the anxiety or change the situation. But just in that situation, I realized like this situation with my daughter and this wash cup,
Hmm.
in a sense, well, not in a sense, for me, was a small miracle, because not only was I able to see my child enjoying a life of meaning and purpose, even in, doing routine things, I was able to appreciate it as well. And I feel that it's no less than miraculous, right? That my camera could shift, right?
Absolutely.
I
It
mean,
is
how,
miraculous because so often, a lot of people would feel intimidated by their children bringing that home, or might feel like, am I not good enough, in my kitchen or my cooking? And yet you seem to just have this open attitude towards it. So that is very miraculous in a sense that you were open to it and saw the beauty in it rather than just put up this like brick fence against it.
well, normally, had it happened even 6 months before, what the thinking in my head would have been was, um, first I would have been thrilled I saw her, right? And then I would have looked at all the stuff around her and I would have been focused on, oh my God, this is so much stuff. We have to get it into the car. Now we're going to be late. We're going to get stuck in rush hour. And by the time we were home, I wouldn't have been thinking about the beauty of the Negovas, or I would have been resentful at my husband for making me drive out. I would have had to come home and had an argument with him that it wasn't fair that I did both driving and picking up.
Right? Because we get so involved in the minuet, the tiny parts of life, that we forget to look at the whole picture, and those special moments. But you're a very educated woman as well as your husband, and you spent, you're a doctor of psychology, and you've been in private practice for many years. How did it feel to start learning some of the basics again? It must have been like somewhat humbling to start now learning things that maybe like you said, your daughter was rolling her eyes like it's a Nickelbuster thing. Don't you know, Ma? How did that feel? And how does it feel?
Well, I mean, one thing is, just as a person, I've always been very open to learning. Even within my field, I still do advanced training in psychotherapy. So,
So
the
you're open to
notion,
growing.
I'm open. I've always been open, to growing, and I think, um, it certainly is humbling, right? It is certainly humbling to admit, that at 53, I'm figuring out what God is, what the Torah is, I think I should know that at this point. Well, I do think I know what the Torah is now. I got to give myself a little credit. But,
I think we're all figuring out what God is in our lives as we continue to mature in our lives. We continue to conceptualize and feel it more. So I don't think you should feel at all like intimidated by that, or less than anybody in that, because I think that's the beauty, that it's an ongoing learning experience. But I'm sure there are points where you have felt, certain basics that you were learning was hard and probably hard to change. The older we get, I think the more used to we are in our circumstances and how we do things and our habits. And here you're just trying to change so much.
I mean, it is, it's very difficult in the sense of, trying to change habits and, having to learn new things and consistently being humbled. Like when my 10-year-old comes home from day school and tells me I'm, you know, not doing something correctly, or my 18-year-old corrects me in a conversation because he learned something with rabbi that I didn't know about. And I have a daughter who spent a year in Israel at a seminary, and like she's my go-to. you know like, Jesse, is this right or is that right? That's why I think it's a journey. you know some parts of the transition were much easier, given who we are as a family, like keeping our house koshering our house, aside from the fact it took 3 weeks and quite a bit of labor. We're not, in our house, we're not like really foodies. Most of the food in our house is really kosher anyway, because you don't realize how many products are kosher. So it was really just, keeping things separate, but other things are extremely difficult. Like, you know, um, keeping Shabbat, or, learning all the rules of Yom Tov, or, you know, which holidays are like a Yom Tov or not. There's a tremendous amount to learn. And even with keeping Shabbat, like, we're making this wholehearted effort to keep Shabbat, but then I'll go into the bathroom and automatically turn off the light as I leave.
Of course, of course.
Or
So
I think,
what part of it do you like best? Or what mitzvah do you feel like most connected to?
oh, that's a good question. I would say it's two. Well, three. One is learning Torah,
Mm.
right?
And it
Because
sounds like you keep on doing that, which is beautiful because we all keep doing that.
there's so much to learn.
Exactly.
And I'm a person who like loves the nuance and intricacy and interpretation and reinterpretation. So the complexity of it. Um, and I mean, something I love just about trying to just bring more Torah into the household in general and live a more observant lifestyle is, the direction and purpose and meaning, it brings to my life.
Mm.
And, I think you heard me say this before, like, in my office, so many people come in without a feeling of connection to others, or not feeling that they have any purpose and direction. And here, like, as a Jewish person, I have one built in,
Interesting. Has it changed your approach at all in terms of as a doctor, as a psychotherapist?
Yes, it has. And I don't think I should admit it because the psychology police might come get me, because we're not supposed to be mixing religion and theory. I joke with my husband about that. But it's changed what I do concretely. Sometimes Rabbi will say something in a, you know, um, Saturday sermon that I think benefited me tremendously, but I think it would benefit other people. And one week he was talking about us all being strugglers,
Mm.
and that how life is a continual struggle between, trying to achieve, um, trying to refine yourself more, trying to spend each day refining yourself to a higher level, and not looking back if you don't,
Hmm.
right? And that there's always a push and pull between, you know, trying to live a life, of, greater refinement, being, pulled back into just, the mundane everyday needs. And so often I'll have people in my office beating themselves up because they did what they knew they weren't supposed to do, and they can't get over the fact that they did it, and why did they do it, and that they're a bad person for having done it, whether it's take a drink or look at their phone if they've vowed not to, or binge or whatever it is. And I had one patient where I actually said, who I know who's not Jewish, but I know is a religious person. So, it's very patient specific who you'd say this to. You certainly wouldn't say it to every patient. She's not Jewish. And I said to her, and I know she has respect for the fact I'm Jewish. So I said to her, my rabbi said something Saturday that I think might help you.
Hmm.
He reminded us that we're all strugglers,
Hmm.
that it's always a struggle to do better, to try more, to try to move ahead. But what's important is that we let yesterday go and just try for the next day. And
So that isn't something that you would have done years ago, like thought of years ago?
no, because I didn't know it years ago. But I think, like, aside from concretely bringing things in that I've learned, I think the thing most overall that it's changed in my approach is, I think psychotherapy in general, is biased towards the individual, right? The individual recognizing their needs, the individual, separating from their family, the individual knowing how to set boundaries around themselves. And although all those things are vital, right? If you don't know who you are and have a strong sense of identity and good self esteem, you're not going to be able to function. But then I think psychotherapy theory stops short of emphasizing, and not all the theories, some more than others, stop short of then emphasizing, okay, well, you are an individual, you've set your boundaries, you know who you are, but then emphasizing the importance of connection to others,
Hmm.
and having a humility that allows you to put other needs before your own
Hmm.
without losing a sense of who you are.
Right. And do you feel that Judaism teaches that?
Well, I do. I do. I do. I think, and that's what I was going to say was one of the things that I find very, you know, positive about Judaism is that it allows me to take the focus off me, you
Right.
know. And to me, there's a tremendous relief in that it's okay to be focused on my children, right? I have permission to do that. And I haven't lost myself in my children most of the time.
Right.
Time I'm pretty good. Or my husband, or, whatever the situation is, it allows me to be connected in a way that is meaningful and important and not have to justify that.
Hmm.
And at the same time, feel that, I'm an individual. I think it allows more room. It allows me to cultivate that sort of duality in a meaningful and important way. Just
That's
psychotherapy doesn't do.
that's fascinating because I think as a society we're so into, our like ourselves, our boundaries and what we need, our needs, and validating ourselves. And it's interesting how you put it, that it gives you the permission to actually think about another person and find that you don't lose yourself in the process, which is really what Judaism is so much about, thinking about others and your place in the world in terms of others, but that doesn't lose your own sense of self. That's a very interesting way of looking at it. That's really quite interesting. Yeah. How do you feel other people respond to your transition, to your journey, your colleagues, your family, friends? How do people react when you have made this transition so much later in life or are on the journey to making the transition? Because we're all on the journey. Um,
Um,
how do others relate to you and feel about you, or even your patients? Have they noticed it?
um, well, different people have responded differently. My sisters who are observant, who are thrilled, and they were able to stay at my house and sleep at my house and eat, and they were thrilled. And I hear them sharing, more of their thoughts about things that are more deeply personal than they would before. I
Mhm,
think because I think I understand at a different level. Not that we weren't close before,
mhm.
but now, it's things that might be considered more, mystical or whatnot, they're willing to share. Um, my colleagues, I was telling Mimi this, think I've drunk the Kool-Aid, so to speak. And my friends, I'm fortunate that many of my friends are from Chabad. So they are very open and, embracing of the, transition. And, it does become, I mean, I'm not going to lie. There are things about it that are very difficult. Like, me and my, we would meet at a certain diner that's right in between all of us. Well, now there's no more diner in between all of us. The diners are actually over near me, which are far from them,
Right.
right? Which are a half hour. But, we'd settle it by meeting in between. So now where is it that we go? Right? Because I don't want to meet them at the diner. So, or, another woman who's a friend of mine is having a bat mitzvah for her daughter, and she's not serving kosher, right? She's just going to have a bat mitzvah. Just, she's just having the bat mitzvah. And so then she says to me, she knows to get kosher for my children. But then she goes, "Oh my God, do I have to get kosher for you too?" And then I feel like stuck in a position where I don't want to embarrass her. I don't want to burden her. But at the same time, the answer is yes. So,
Sure.
I find myself in that position. But I think the hardest, those situations are hard emotionally, right? But once I get past it with a friend, it becomes no issue. They just know this is how Lana is, and we're not going to meet for food. We're going to meet for something else.
Right.
But the hardest, is my colleagues who, you know, um, they're perfectly willing to join me on the part of the journey that is intellectual and makes sense. Like, they will not deny the notion that a keeping of a Sabbath where you're with your family and have quiet time makes perfect sense, right? They won't, deny even that keeping kosher makes sense because it gives you a cohesive identity with a group. But once you mention the word God or divine, that's when, I lose them.
Hmm. So a higher being or higher purpose doesn't really go.
Um, it's very interesting because some of them are even like yoga practitioners, and the notion, of a higher being or a higher force or a connective force, is something they believe in,
Right. I would think so.
so that is fine. But a higher force that requires all these rules to relate to,
Hmm. A lot of details.
right? I think that's where, they
A
feel
washing cup, like a hot pink washing cup.
exactly like, why on earth would you need a hot pink washing cup, when there's this divine force out there that just feels good, gives unity, and we could,
It's
you
the
know
God of the details.
right.
Do you
Right.
feel that you're do you feel that you're missing out on anything in your transition, in your journey?
Definitively no.
Wow, that's a really strong no.
Yeah, definitively no. I feel it adds more by far than it takes away. Now, admittingly, that's part of my lifestyle, right? I wasn't, you know, I mean, I don't even know what you would be doing with that would, but so maybe it's just who I am. I mean, but definitively no. I mean, in terms of kosher, as I had mentioned, my husband and I, our family really aren't foodies, so making our house kosher was not an issue. Keeping the Sabbath and trying to, I don't find an issue because, okay, one day I'm not doing these things. I can do them on Sunday. This is not a big deal for the reward it gives at the other end for the, I'm not just doing it as I would have thought at 13 to follow a bunch of rules that I was supposed to follow because some man wrote them down in a book, 3,000 years ago. I'm doing them for a reason. I'm doing them to feel a greater connection to, my heritage and other people. I'm doing that to bring, joy and light into my home and a sense of meaning and purpose for my children who see me doing these things. So the payoff is worth any restriction. But my husband isn't as far along as I am in the journey. So that sometimes becomes difficult. I mean, overall, he's extremely supportive, right? But, he still wants to go to a regular restaurant.
Sure. So how do you handle that conflict?
Um, well, thank God
Yeah,
I live in an area that's like 3 miles from numerous kosher
that
restaurants.
helps.
So that definitively helps, but it's bigger than that, right? He wants to plan a cruise or plan a vacation, and having to find a kosher cruise or a kosher vacation for the kids and me. When my daughter, who's in from Israel, who's become observant, is with us, he has no problem, right? So for Passover break, he's 100% on board with scheduling, like, a cruise that will be kosher and celebrate the Sabbath. He has no issue. You know, with me, as I'm transitioning more, I'm trying to not have because he's so respectful, and in general, like, if I'm tired at 8:30 at night and I go to grab a fork and I grab the wrong one, he'll say, "Isn't that a meat fork?" Right? If I'm having yogurt, right?
Right.
I don't want to antagonize him. Um, but, and he's said many times that he'll support any lifestyle, but I worry about him missing out.
Right. Sure. So you're sensitive to his needs, which is important.
I don't want him to not go on the cruise he wants to go on
Yeah.
because I can't go on that cruise. It should be my sacrifice, not his. Um, so, it's those kinds of things are a balance,
Of course.
you
But the
know.
truth is, any couple has that kind of balance in other areas of their lives. So it's all about, I guess, a give and take in any relationship and how you navigate it, right? Not to be sensitive to the other's needs while making sure you set firm boundaries about what your needs are.
Sure. I mean, if one member of the couple is a big sports fanatic and the other isn't, and the person involved in sports wants to spend every Sunday at the ball field and the other wants to do things with the kids, you come to an agreement on how it works for both of you.
Hmm. Right. As long as you're both, sensitive to each other's needs and your understanding of where each person is at. Is there any message that you would say to your younger self at this point?
All the time I say, you know why in the heck did I not do this at 13? It would have been so much easier. It would have been like 1,000 times easier because, you asked me, like, is it humbling at, your age to learn all these things? It's challenging, humbling is part of it, but it's like relearning your entire life.
Sure, of
So
course.
it's hard. It's
Of course.
hard.
It is hard, right? But on
So,
the other hand, like you just said, you're at 13, you might have accepted certain things with a much more limited understanding, whereas now everything that you're taking on seems to have so much more depth to it and meaning.
yeah, no, I mean, it would have been much easier, I joke at 13, of course, because then I could have been, built an adult lifestyle around the things I want to do. For instance, keeping Shabbat would have not been a question because it would be a lifestyle I know, and I wouldn't have to force myself to remember not to,
Sure.
turn off the lights or on the lights. It would just be habit. But, I figure, it's the way, God wanted it to be. And you know, this was the time that I was set to learn it,
Mhm.
not at 13. And I think it's for the reasons you said. If I had embraced it at 13, maybe I would have never embraced it in the same way or with as much depth and meaning.
Right.
Oh,
It would have been habit, but it wouldn't have been something that you're actively thinking about and pursuing and taking on, with your whole self at this
right,
point in life.
right.
There are a lot of different people that are out there listening who might be thinking, maybe they want to embrace some part of Judaism or take a step in their observance. What advice would you give them, or what thoughts would you like to share with them as your parting thoughts?
Well, if they're watching Chabad.org, the thing I recommend, and this is something actually I do recommend to my patients, is go to your local Chabad and go for a fun event. Start there. Go for whether it's a woman's class or a men's class or a woman's, challah bake, or certainly the children's programming is incredible. And I encourage people to go to their local Chabad and start there because that's where I believe there, and through my children going to a Chabad camp, learned that the Judaism that I learned as a child, which in many ways was a turnoff,
Mm.
is not the same Judaism that I'm embracing as an adult.
Mm.
And Chabad, emphasizes, what is joyful, what is beautiful, what is meaningful. And it emphasizes, connection. And those are such important things. And the other thing I think about Chabad that's so attractive, to so many people is that it's very accepting,
Mm.
right? You don't have to be anything, right? You could be, in terms of level of observance, at our Chabad, there's people like me moving up the journey. One of my best friends comes from a mixed marriage. She's Jewish and her husband isn't. Um, Her poor husband hears a ton about Judaism and comes to things, but he's not Jewish. Um, and there's many couples, that are mixed marriages. And, I'll leave, just with a funny note about, the open and accepting nature, what I think is very important, because that extends to, rabbis and Mimi's open nature extends to how the congregation in general accepts newcomers,
Very true.
right? And that they're in general very open to people. And I think a lot of Chabads are that way.
Mhm.
But one time I was trying to get my daughter, my oldest, who's the least affiliated, to go to synagogue with me on a Saturday. And she said, Mom, I can't go. I have nothing to wear. And I said, Rachel, are you kidding me? You know, if you showed up to shul on a Saturday in shorts and a half top, Rabbi would be so thrilled you were there, he could care less what you're wearing.
Correct. Right. Absolutely. That's beautiful.
So she did go to shul with me, and not in shorts and a half top. I think she did at least agree to wear jeans. But maybe still wore the half top. I don't quite remember, but she did put on some jeans.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Okay, Lana, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much, Dr. Lana Tiersky. Good luck in all your future journey, as we all journey through life, as we all hope to grow and learn and gain and become better people. You're certainly an inspiration in where you've come from and where you've gotten to. And I wish you and your family tremendous luck in the future and tremendous success in going forward and continuing to pursue that meaningful life.
Well, thank you for having me. I enjoyed it and hope to speak with you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining.
Okay, take